Mike Brown, the former FEMA director.
Joining us here is the former FEMA director.
History, I think, was very unkind to you, my friend. Very unkind.
Mr. Brown, thanks for being with us.
This is Michael Brown Unplugged.
Hey, welcome to this episode of The Situation with Michael Brown. Glad to have you with me. I want to talk about what's being called the gun sanctuary movement. So we're going to be talking about the Second Amendment, firearms, extreme risk protection orders, and this movement called gun sanctuary counties, gun sanctuary cities, sheriffs that are refusing to enforce or comply with extreme risk protection orders. It is driving people on the left nuts. Every once in a while, if you really want to get your blood pressure up or you truly want to understand, you've heard me say a bazillion times that I never walked into a courtroom. I never walked into any situation where I was either presenting a case or I was a witness without understanding what the other side was thinking or doing. That was true for when I was practicing law. It was true when I went into congressional hearings. You have to understand what the other side thinks if you're going to effectively respond to it. So I made the mistake of, I make this mistake often, of going to liberal websites just to read what they're saying, to understand why they think the way they think. So I went to Slate, and one of their editors, David Toscano, has written an article called "The Gun Sanctuary Movement is Exploding," which it is, and for which I'm eternally grateful. Every sheriff that says that they will not comply with an extreme risk protection order, a red flag law, I stand up and sing the Hallelujah chorus. Every time a city or county says that we are going to be a Second Amendment sanctuary city or county, I stand up and sing the Hallelujah chorus. Why is that? Because we are taking a game, a play from the playbook of the progressives and using it for conservative libertarian ideas. It makes it hard for them to argue. But in this article, David Toscano tries to make that argument, and I actually find it to be funny. So here's how this episode of the podcast is going to play out. I don't normally just read through an article, and I'm not going to read through this article in its entirety. Well, I am going to read through it in its entirety, but it's going to be read with commentary because it's too good to pass up. So again, the title of the article is "The Gun Sanctuary Movement is Exploding." And he starts out this way. Conservatives have railed for years against so-called sanctuary jurisdictions, criticizing localities that refuse to cooperate with federal immigration policies they deem heartless and ineffective. In the past year, however, he writes, some conservative lawmakers have taken a page from the progressive playbook, employing sanctuary imagery in opposition to gun safety legislation they deem to be an unconstitutional restriction of their rights under the Second Amendment. Wow. I could spend an hour just on the first paragraph. He says that conservatives rail against sanctuary jurisdictions because, locales are refusing to cooperate with federal immigration policies that they deem heartless and ineffective. Here's the key that I think you need to understand about what he's saying at this particular point. He says that conservatives are against sanctuary jurisdictions because localities, state, local, municipal governments, are refusing to cooperate with federal immigration policies. What does that mean, to refuse to cooperate? Isn't that the same thing as saying, I'm not going to help you enforce that law? And in fact, when you think about refusing to, let me think of an example. A county is holding a illegal alien in custody for drunk driving. They know that person is an illegal alien, but they refuse to tell Immigration and Customs Enforcement that they have someone in their custody that ICE might have an interest in. A great case in Colorado is this woman, I don't remember her name, that Jared Polis, our governor, recently commuted her sentence. I take that back. I think he actually pardoned her. She had been found guilty of falsely using a fake Social Security number or something. And there's a deportation order out on her. She's been hiding in churches around the Denver metropolitan area. She's been hiding, and these churches have been giving her sanctuary so that ICE can't enforce the deportation order. Isn't that the same as refusing to follow the law? Now, as a parenthetical, I've never understood why ICE just doesn't go in and take somebody out of a church. I mean, for example, if I was hiding somebody in my home that I knew had a deportation order, and I was giving them sanctuary down here in my home studio, couldn't ICE just get a warrant, come in, pick them up, take them out? I mean, this woman has been in the news everywhere. We know what churches she's been hiding in. ICE could get her, but they haven't. Separate issue. The point being, what they are doing, the churches and this woman, is they are blocking enforcement of the law. And that's important to remember later in this story. At the end of this paragraph, he also says that conservatives have decided to take a playbook from the progressive playbook by employing sanctuary counties, sanctuary cities, in opposition to gun legislation. But he calls it gun safety legislation that we, quote, deem to be an unconstitutional restriction of our rights under the Second Amendment. Well, it is. It is an infringement on our right to keep and bear arms. But I like the use of the word gun safety legislation because that makes you think, oh, it's all about safety. No, it's not. It's about taking guns away. It's about making you unsafe. So there in just the first paragraph is a great example of how they use language for their targeted audience, which are progressives, to think that, oh, this whole idea about Second Amendment sanctuary cities, that's different than what they're doing. And he tries to explain that in the next paragraph. The two approaches are classic cases of false equivalency. Jurisdictions that proclaim themselves sanctuaries for immigrants do not seek to violate the law. They simply refuse to engage local law enforcement in supporting actions that are federal responsibilities. They do not block the law, but simply insist that it should be enforced by those who have the responsibility to do so. I haven't even finished this paragraph. Think about it. When he says they don't block the law, now remember we're talking about sanctuary immigration, sanctuary cities and states. He's saying that those sanctuary cities and states don't block the law. They're simply insisting that it should be enforced by those who have the responsibility to do so. But by making themselves sanctuary cities or counties or states, they are blocking the law because they are making it impossible, if not difficult, or I should say difficult if not impossible, for the federal government to enforce those laws. So they are, in essence, blocking the law. They seek to prevent enforcement of the law. Isn't that blocking the law? If you successfully seek to prevent enforcement of the law, you're blocking the law. He ends the paragraph with this. For some proponents of so-called gun sanctuaries, however, the goal is to prevent enforcement of state law that the jurisdiction deems unconstitutional. Isn't that exactly what sanctuary immigration cities and states do? They believe that immigration laws are unconstitutional or heartless or ineffective, and they don't want them enforced. So they impose sanctuary policies that prevent the federal government from enforcing the law. They say that's okay for immigration, but that's not okay for the Second Amendment. And they call it a false equivalency. It's not. It's exactly the same thing. He continues, the emergence of these sanctuaries demonstrates a growing rift. The Tazewell County, Virginia Board of Supervisors recently jumped aboard the fast-moving Second Amendment sanctuaries train. In doing so, it embraced positions fundamentally at odds with state and federal constitutional law. Passing resolutions, opposing certain laws, or protesting governmental action is perfectly consistent with our traditions as a democracy. You know, that bugs me. We're not a democracy. We're a republic. And no one should oppose the rights of citizens and their representatives to speak their minds. But, he writes, Tazewell County and a number of other localities across Virginia want to do much more. As Eric Young, an attorney and the county administrator, put it, quote, our position is that Article 1, Section 13 of the Constitution of Virginia reserves the right to order militia to the localities. Therefore, counties, not the state, determine what types of arms may be carried in their territory and by whom. So we are ordering the militia by making sure everyone can own a weapon, close quote. I don't see how that's a violation of the Second Amendment. I don't see how declaring yourself a sanctuary county, as Tazewell County did, is in any way violating the Constitution. And I also see that it's not a false equivalency. If, let's just play the game. If, for example, they think that somehow this is violating some sort of state law or federal law, are they not doing exactly the same thing that immigration sanctuary cities and counties do? They're saying, we're not going to enforce this Virginia law that, restricts concealed carry, restricts open carry, restricts all of these other things. We're just saying we're not going to enforce that law in our county. That's exactly what sanctuary cities, in terms of immigration, do also. It's not a false equivalency. He writes, after Democrats won majorities in both chambers of the Virginia General Assembly, fears of stricter gun regulations have inspired a rise in Second Amendment sanctuary activity in the state. Sanctuary efforts are driven mainly by the Virginia Citizens Defense League, a group to the right of the NRA. I didn't know that the NRA was either a right-wing or a left-wing organization. I thought it was a Second Amendment organization. You see, what they're trying to tell you here is, if you're a supporter of the right to keep and bear arms, which is what the Second Amendment says, that must make you a right-winger. Let's jump to the end of the story. He writes, the Virginia State Legislature will soon consider several major gun safety measures, and opponents will likely strongly resist. As one county supervisor has said, quote, we need to show them a crowd like they have never seen. They need to be afraid, and they should be afraid, close quote. He writes, legislators should always be attuned to any unintended consequences of the laws that they pass. That is one reason we have a deliberative process before bills are passed. But, he says, to leave the enforcement of duly passed laws totally in the hands of sheriffs and local officials with discretionary power to determine their constitutionality is a direct attack on Republican government and the Constitution itself. Let's say that's true. If that's true for Second Amendment sanctuary cities, it's true for immigration sanctuary cities and counties. You see, they want to have it both ways. They want to claim that it's a false equivalency. It's not. It's exactly the same thing. Now, what do I think about sanctuary cities for the Second Amendment? I'm for it. And the reason I'm for it is I don't believe it's a false equivalency. The Second Amendment is clear. Of course, I believe that immigration law is clear too. And immigration law says that if you come into this country illegally, unlawfully, you can be subjected to deportation orders, and you can be removed from the country. By having sanctuary cities and counties where you prevent that from happening, where you do everything you can to stop that from happening, I think you're in violation of the law. So how can I then justify a sanctuary city or county that's a Second Amendment sanctuary city or county? I simply go to the amendment, the Second Amendment. A well-regulated militia, which is the prefatory clause, being necessary to the security of a free state, another prefatory clause, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Shall not be infringed. It's an individual right. And what these sheriffs are saying is, we believe that if you enact a law that infringes on the right of an individual to keep and bear arms, that's a violation of the Constitution. And they take an oath to uphold the Constitution, and they say they're not going to enforce it. What will that do? That will lead to either a contempt citation, a lawsuit, but somehow, somewhere, a court's going to make that decision. And I'm all for that. When it comes to immigration policy, nobody tests it. They just leave it alone. Because you know why? They don't want to test it in court. So yes, the gun sanctuary movement is exploding. And I think it's about time. Thanks for listening to the situation with Michael Brown. Thanks for joining me. If you'd like to comment about gun sanctuary movement, feel free to do so. You can find me on Twitter at Michael Brown USA or on Facebook at Michael D. Brown. You can follow the situation with Michael Brown. You can simply go to the Facebook page, and there's a group there on the Facebook page. And if you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe to the podcast, either on Apple Podcasts, iHeart, Stitcher, Google Podcasts, well, frankly, just wherever you're listening to it right now. And if you've been enjoying the podcast, I really would appreciate it if you'd leave a 5-star rating and a positive review. The Situation with Michael Brown is written by me and produced by Right Turn Media. Marketing and social media is by Whole Crowd. Thanks again for listening to The Situation with Michael Brown. I'll talk to you tomorrow.